Welcome to the Common Law Court of Wales radio broadcast. We're joined by Joanne Fowler, who's going to tell us about the harrowing story of her dad, Frank, and what he had to put up with the NHS in Britain 2014, I think it was. Joanne, is that correct?
Yes, it was last year, yes, it was. Yes, he died on the 13th of June, 1 year ago.
Right.
And I promised when he died in my arms that his suffering will never ever be in vain. I promised him that his suffering, it was avoidable, will help other people, that nobody, good will come out of something so terrible, and that is what I intend to happen, because I now understand that so many other people are suffering just like my father did. I mean, my father was 93 years old. He was blind and he was deaf, and he was the most gentle, caring man that anybody could wish to have as a father. I can never remember my dad losing his temper. He would listen. He was a great listener, and he was never judgmental. He was kind, and everybody loved him. And even though he was blind and deaf, my dad never complained. He still said life is good. He was so selfless, I just can't imagine, just sitting in the dark. 'Cause my dad went completely blind in December. So he had very, very bad eyesight before that. And I wonder, had the tumour that we didn't know he had a tumour. We were told, my mother was told in the corridor when he went into hospital, that he had brain cancer. And we didn't tell my dad because he'd suffered so much, and we just did not want him to know, really. And, we were told that he had 6 weeks to live, maybe 6 months. But we just prayed that he would go to sleep and not wake up. Nobody told us what may happen. And what did happen was just barbaric. I would describe what happened to my father as a scene of execution, slow execution. And I was just begging for help. I was totally distraught. And unfortunately, the report that was done into my father said that there is no evidence of neglect on my father. So what you hear in these recordings, which I did record my father because I thought to myself, this can't be happening. This cannot be happening. We are in a multi-million-pound brand new hospital, and my father is screaming out in agony. He was tearing his clothes off. It was just too terrible to witness.
What was the name of the hospital, please, Joanne?
It was the Tunbridge Wells Hospital in Tunbridge Wells, Tunbridge Wells and Maidstone Trust Hospital. Brand new hospital. I believe this hospital is not fit for purpose because every single person in this hospital has their own room. And I believe if this had been on a ward, this wouldn't have happened. Because I can't imagine somebody screaming out like my father was. It wouldn't have been allowed. The door was shut on us, and we were begging for help.
Yes. Could you tell us a bit about Frank's life, Joanne? Because we will play the screams and that which you recorded, which I will advise the listeners are quite harrowing, but we must listen to these because it's important and gives us an understanding of the suffering, really, that was needlessly...
Absolutely. But what the viewers and the listeners must remember, had I not recorded this would have been another untold story, because what is in these recordings is happening now as we speak up and down our country. Because my father, there was no evidence of neglect. And I had a meeting at the hospital, and I said to the head nurse, can you tell me as we speak, is anybody suffering like my dad was now? Well, of course she couldn't answer me, because of course they are. And by all the letters I've had, all the emails I've had, full of other people's terrible suffering, and unless, people aren't there to tell their story, because sadly they pass away. The relatives may tell their story to their friends and family, and who are just so distraught, but this does not get out to the media. If I had not had these recordings, this is another story that would have gone untold. And some good has to come out of this, because remember, we want not one penny compensation, nothing, only that my dad's suffering helps other people. It helps I want to see changes made for the better for humanity. This cannot be hidden. This has to be faced. This is the reality. This is the reality. And this is my father not being neglected. And I believe this country, the entire country, all four corners of it, must be horrified by this.
This is not an isolated case, Joanne. I'm sure that you would have found this out in the research that you have done since. I mean, Frank's battle, as you mentioned earlier when we had a chat, he was a fit man in his day, Joanne, wasn't he? He was in the army, and he was a strong man. And for him to end up in the state he did is an absolute disgrace to the country as a whole, I think, Joanne.
Yes, it is an absolute disgrace. It is a total disgrace. I have been told, had this been in a private ward, in a private hospital, this wouldn't have happened. My dad was given one-to-one nursing after the most barbaric weekend. He was given one-to-one nursing. The report actually said my father was only given one-to-one nursing because of damage limitation, not because he needed it.
Yeah.
So that in itself, what are hospitals doing, giving a patient one-to-one nursing when he didn't really need it, that in itself is a scandal. The fact that £11,000 of public money was spent on a report that stated my dad wasn't neglected, that is a scandal. You know, this money, really, there is no need to have a report done, if that's the case, because it's not worth the paper it's written on. And I feel that every penny that was spent on that report should go to a hospice in the world or some charity. You know, this isn't about money. The love I have for my father, you know, it's something you can't buy. Love is something you can't buy. And what I'm doing now, my life is devoted to this campaign. This can't be bought. This is because my father was loved so much. His suffering cannot be in vain. He has got to have this in his memory, that my father helped other people. He helped other people avoid suffering.
Yes, I'd just like to bring up a few methods that the modern day NHS are employing these days. The elderly and the sick and the people who are terminally ill towards the last days of their life. We have what was known as the Liverpool Care Pathway. Have you heard about that, Joanne?
Yes, I have heard about that, yes.
Now,
unfortunately, I don't understand too much about that.
Right. Well, I'll just read a little bit, because the government commissioned a review in 2013 about this Liverpool Care Pathway, which is basically when somebody is coming to the end of their life expectancy, then the doctors will make the decision not to give any more medication to that one, or to keep giving medication to that one, and basically it was nil by mouth. You die by no food or water and no care. We recently had somebody here in South Wales who went 11 days, he's an old gentleman, he was cancer riddled, 11 days without food and water before he passed away. Now, he was unable to talk, and he was, you know, asleep a lot of the time, but it's just abandonment in the last days.
That is cruel and shocking. It's cruel and shocking,
yes.
And I 100% am totally against that.
I do urge anyone,
totally against that.
I do urge anyone to look into it. I mean, they did have this commission. I'll talk a bit about it. It was in 2013. It was headed by Lady Newberger, and the commission found that the pathway was in itself not to blame, but the poor training and sometimes the total lack of compassion nursing staff themselves was to blame.
Yes.
This is a quote from her, Joanne. We have also exposed in this review is a range of a far wider fundamental problems within the care for the dying, a lack
yes.
of care and compassion, unavailability and suitably trained staff.
Yes.
Right, the care minister at the time, his name was Norman Lamb, and he had this to say about it. He had heard families describe staff, nursing staff this is, selfishly following process without care or compassion and leaving people suffering at the very end of their lives. The review listened to harrowing stories from families who had not been told their loved ones were expected to die. In some cases, they were shouted at for attempting to give them a drink of water. They have said that they're going to get rid of this scheme, but doctors have come out since and described the care pathway and they've had a look at the nuts and bolts of it, and they basically said that they've just rebranded it. They've not abolished it. The senior doctors have actually come out and said, hey, listen, we haven't abolished nothing, this is just a rebranding. What I'm trying to get at, Joanne, is we seem to have a fundamental problem here in the NHS that is, it's not on the surface, it runs deep into the core, into the training and the ethics and the way nursing is done today. It's lacking care, I think.
100%. And I also think nurses are immune to suffering. They're immune to suffering. And also I think a lot of relatives are like, I apparently should have been ushered away, so I did not witness what my father was going through. I should have been taken out of the room. But thank God I wasn't. Thank God I witnessed. You know, thank God I witnessed. What about the people who had no one? No one. It's happening. It's barbaric, the end of life for people, for so many people. How frightening, how terrifying for a person. And you have no idea. I had no idea this sort of thing happened. It is totally barbaric and it is totally wrong, and something has got to be done about it.
Yes, and I mean...
sorry.
Sorry, Joanne, please continue.
So when my father was told, a week before he died, because he was deteriorating so badly, my brother came over from Germany, and he was in tears to see my dad in the distress he was in, and he gave my dad, my dad took his ring off to give to my brother, like he was given it on his father's deathbed. And my brother said, no, I won't take it yet, Dad. You know, when you're ready. And my dad looked above when my brother had gone and said, I'm ready. He said, I'm ready. I want to, you know, I'm ready for what he has planned for me. Not knowing what was planned for him was the worst pain known to man. And my dad was told he would be kept comfortable and distress-free. Well, that is the hospital's take, comfortable and distress-free, what you hear in those recordings.
It's quite... Well, it's not quite. It's absolutely disturbing. I mean, there's no getting away from it. I mean, you can feel it, even if you don't understand the words that are being said. And I mean, this is not an isolated case. There was a young gentleman. His name was Kane Gorney. He was 22, and he died from dehydration in a hospital. This kid actually rang police. He rang the police for a drop of water.
Oh.
I'll just read a bit of this now. I've just found it. Kane Gorney, who died from dehydration whilst in hospital, was so desperate for a drink of water, he phoned the police from his bed for help. An inquest has been told that Kane Gorney's mum, Rita, when the police turned up at St George's Hospital, Tooting, they were turned away by the doctors, and she was repeatedly ignored by staff when she begged for help for her son. He became severely dehydrated, but his requests for water were refused. He died on May the 28th, 2009. After his death, while Kane's family held his lifeless body, they were asked by a nurse whether they had finished, and could she bag him up now. The hearing at Westminster Coroner's Court was told. She told the inquest he was lying on the bed on his back, his lips were very swollen and his tongue was swollen. He just looked delirious. At that moment, 3 nurses were standing outside the room. I said, is there anything wrong with my son? There's something must be wrong with my son. The night nurse said, he's had a good night and there's nothing wrong with him. The mother said, he's not well. And the other nurse just tutted and said, she's already told you he's had a good night. And they just walked off. No, get this, Joanne, because I could not believe this statistic. Thirst is needlessly killing, and this is a fact, and if anyone, and I urge our listeners to check it out, thirst alone is killing 33 patients a day in British hospitals.
Yeah.
And a government advisor has since revealed this stat, that 33 people a day are dying just from thirst. So this spans across everybody, from the elderly to the young, trapped within the hospital. Now, it may just be one example, but it's backed up with the fact that we are losing 33 men, women and children a day in Britain in the hospitals in 2015.
Yes.
It's
shocking. It's absolutely shocking.
It is absolutely shocking. You did say that if he had had private care, things may have been different, Joanne.
I was told by the nurse who was sent to look after him, if this had happened if your dad had been in a private hospital, this wouldn't have happened, because there is a private part of the hospital he was in. If this had happened in a private hospital, this would not have happened to your father. And the nurse just said, another nurse said to me, oh, what happened to your father was just unfortunate. In a very cold, matter-of-fact way.
Yeah.
Well, that's not good enough.
It doesn't seem to be any feeling or
No.
empathy here at all, Joanne.
None.
Now, this was highlighted more in a Panorama investigation into care home abuse. Was quite unbelievable. I'd like to read what the Mail Online had to say on the Panorama investigation at the time, if that's okay, Joanne.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so this is what the Mail Online had to say. Carers ignored the desperate cries for help of bedridden 98-year-old woman despite her calling for assistance 321 times in a single hour. Shocking secret footage filmed inside Auburn House Care Home in Croydon, South London, showed great-grandmother Yvonne Grant begging to be taken to the toilet. For 2.5 hours she was begging. Tragically, the hidden camera, which was placed in the room and by concerned granddaughter Vanessa Evans, captured the final undignified days of Mrs. Grant's life, as she died less than a month later. The footage shows the mother of four crying out for help hundreds of times in less than an hour, including making 45 requests to be taken to the toilet. When a member of staff finally arrived, 2.5 hours later, they instructed Mrs. Grant to use her incontinence pad, which basically is like an adult nappy pad thing. It's ridiculous. And if I urge people to look at this footage, as well as the footage of Frank's, to understand the gravity of what we were talking about. This woman was frail. She could hardly pick this pad thing up. She'd never used it before, but yet that was the remedy these so-called carers give to this elderly lady of 98. When the member of staff finally arrived 2.5 hours later, they instructed Mrs. Grant to use the pad, something she'd never done before. Miss Grant was then helped out of bed and told to walk to the toilet by herself. When she couldn't manage it, the 98-year-old was dropped roughly back onto the bed. All recorded. It wasn't until some time later that she was finally taken to the toilet. Speaking to the newspaper, Mrs. Grant's granddaughter, Vanessa Evans, 43, said, "When I saw the video, I was devastated and fuming, but I can't say I was shocked. I was expecting to find something, but I didn't think it would be this extreme. Her calls were definitely ignored because and get this, the nurse's station is right outside the room." Mrs. Grant, who moved into Auburn House Care Home in 2010 after losing her RAF hero husband, John, 24 years earlier, died within days of her granddaughter telling her that she had placed a secret camera in the room and recorded the suffering. Now, this is what Mrs. Grant had to say. Does that mean it will stop and not happen to other people? Footage by an undercover reporter for BBC's Panorama also showed residents being mocked and taunted and workers ignoring pleas from elderly people who wanted help. Incredibly, the home was given a glowing reference to the healthcare watchdogs in November, even as the abuse is alleged to have taken place. The claims contain disturbing echoes of the scandal at Waterburn View Care Home in Bristol, where 6 workers were jailed over the abuse of vulnerable people with mental health problems. That was also exposed by Panorama, by the way. Yeah. The journalists saw rough handling of residents, call for assistance repeatedly ignored, and the elderly people being goaded and left to sit and lie in their own mess. The Panorama programme also found that residents were ignored, call bells were unplugged, and one man in his 80s was repeatedly called, and forgive me, but I've got to quote this, a bitch. One whistleblower, known as Amy, told the programme Panorama it was horrible. There was one resident, there'd be a massive puddle on the floor, and the amount of time that people just walked back and forward to shrug it off was incredible. Another, Caris, said she saw people mocking them, winding them up, and being just downright abusive. It's just more proof of that this is not an isolated case, what happened to Frank, Joanne.
No, and I think what you'll find now is more and more people will do what I did. More people will do what that young girl did, you know, because we can. They can't get away with it now, you know. I'm not saying all nurses are not good, because there are some amazing nurses. Of course there are. Like in any profession, there's good and there's bad, but it runs far deeper than just the doctors and nurses. It runs far deeper.
I think it
no,
goes.
I'm afraid there are some nurses who shouldn't be nurses, who should not be nurses. You need compassion. You need compassion to be a nurse. And a lot of nurses do have compassion, but unfortunately a lot of them don't.
We seem to have this throughout the whole system, whether it be private, NHS, young, elderly. I mean, it's just a total lack of care. Any real nurse then, with the qualities that one would think would be the most outstanding qualities that you would need in a nurse, that would be empathy, caring, love.
Yes. I mean, what should have happened with my dad? As soon as, if I had been with my dad, nothing would have happened. But he would have just been left. But I was with my dad, and I was begging for somebody to get some, you know, for a doctor to come. Well, the nurse eventually did ring a doctor. There was a doctor on the ward, but he didn't come and see my dad. He was actually on the ward, and he didn't. And there was lots of phone calls made after that for a doctor to come and see my dad, but he didn't. So communication is broken down. But they should have insisted, absolutely, look, we have got a gentleman here that is absolutely in agony. Something's got to be done, and made clear to people, do something, you know, do something, for goodness sake, do something. Don't stand by in a hospital and watch someone suffer.
I think that it'd be very difficult for an old-fashioned nurse, if you like, then, you know, the type of person that we spoke with, the values just now, to survive in such an environment. I mean, if you was sane at all and you've seen your other colleagues treating patients like this, you wouldn't be able to stick it, Joanne. I mean,
I believe a lot of wonderful nurses have left because of that.
I think so. I think that
a lot of nurses have had enough. A lot of nurses have had enough. They've seen enough. They've had enough. And a lot of nurses are afraid to speak out. They see it and they have to witness it, and they're afraid to speak out.
Well, the lady who done the undercover program for Panorama, her name was Alex Lee, and I'd just now like to read for you her thoughts on it. It's called "They Cried for Help But Nobody Came" by Alex Lee, the undercover Panorama reporter. Handkerchief in hand, she sobbed. "Everybody neglects me," she said. "I ring and I ring, but nobody comes near me." This was an elderly lady dying of terminal illness, who was in the final months of her life. All she needed was somebody to help her into the toilet, but nobody answered her calls. Sitting in the armchair, where she spent most of her day, this care home resident had pressed her call bell to summon assistance, but nobody came. I couldn't be sure how long she'd been waiting, but it was heartbreaking to see her in anguish. That night I couldn't get the scene out of my mind. These are her last days. I recorded the video in the diary that I had been keeping, so that they could be made free and as comfortable as possible. One of the most basic things she needs to do, and she can't. This was not an isolated incident, but an example of something I saw time and time again while working undercover for Panorama as a care assistant at the old deanery, a 93-bed residential home in Essex. I had no experience. The old deanery had put me through a mandatory 3-day training course. The BBC had then provided further training to make sure I was prepared as possible. Earning just over £7 an hour, I was one of the frontline staff, providing care for the frail elderly residents who, in some cases, were very ill and often very confused. Those who needed limited assistance could live in a comfortable life at home. It was those who needed extra help that I worried about. Over the 36 shifts during which I wore hidden cameras, I lost count of the times I found residents who had sat for hours with soiled pads. For example, as a care assistant, I hoisted a resident into bed. I noticed his trousers were saturated. He had long since lost the ability to ask for help. Like others in the home, he relied on care staff to keep him dry and clean. Yet he had again been allowed to wet himself. The chair in which he had sat since breakfast was sopping wet. Another time, as we sat in the staff area, the call bell rang in the background, as it did most days. But this was regularly the case. Nobody got up and attended to the alarm until they were good and ready to. As I walked into the room, the bell stopped ringing. which meant the resident had been attended to. At least that's what the idea was. When I walked in, the resident, whose chronic illness had left him bedbound and completely reliant on care staff, told me his bowels had opened. I asked him how long ago it happened. He said an hour. He told me her heart sunk. My distress turned into anger, though, when it was transparent that 2 care workers had been to answer his call but had done nothing to help him. The resident told me, and this is typical, it's okay, I'm not complaining. Like many of the home's occupants, he didn't like to complain, or perhaps he felt he couldn't. On almost all of my shifts, call bells were sounded for a significant amount of time, for a number of residents. Sometimes it was simply because we were too busy helping others, but other times it was just simply ignored. But what if the resident couldn't even summon that help in the first place? Whilst I was there, the company running the old deanery was bought by a new owner and management in an attempt to get to answer the bells more quickly. However, I noticed in 3 different resident homes, call bells were unplugged. The 3 known to call for help a lot. So there was 3 residents in this home who used to call for help a lot. They just simply unplugged the bells.
Yeah.
And that was the solution.
Yeah.
I'll continue. While I was working at the old deanery, the CQC inspected it again and gave the home a clean bill of health for the first time in 18 months. Yet what I witnessed stunned me. One resident I got to know was Joan Madison. She had early stage dementia and had been paralysed by a severe stroke in her 50s. She was considered by some care workers to be difficult. One morning, just 11 days after the inspection, it was the turn of a care assistant, Anita, to get Joan ready. Anita had been named by whistleblowers 12 months previous as having a real bad attitude. She had been promoted to relief senior care assistant. So here we have people with bad attitudes, aggressive to the elderly, are getting promoted.
Shocking.
So, you know, how can anyone of decent value work for somebody like that?
No.
Well, anyway, that gave her the authority to supervise a shift and to administer medication. Upon entering Joan's room, I could instantly see the atmosphere was tense. I couldn't say, so I left an unmanned camera to capture events. Here we go. With Joan lying on her bed, with bed rails up and wearing just a nightie and socks, Anita, this is the boss now, became increasingly angry, and she and another carer tried to get Joan up in order to wash and dress her. The situation escalated after Joan appeared to scratch Anita, a frail old woman, frightened. Joan laughed at Anita, who told her she won't be laughing when she's in a secure unit. Anita then lost her temper, raised her hand, and appeared to have slapped the old lady Joan. Over 28 mornings, the cameras captured Joan being roughly handled, mocked, mistreated by the people who were supposed to be looking after her. But not all the care was bad. I worked with many good care workers who were trying their best under difficult circumstances. It's a poorly paid, difficult job, and it's physically, emotionally demanding. But there we have an example of how a good nurse goes in, you know, with all the right ideas and things, and just gets totally annihilated by these. I don't know how to describe. They're not carers, Joanne, are they? These people.
No, but even if they're not earning a massive amount of money, you know, care can't be bought with money. It's in something inside your heart.
Absolutely.
Whether it's £15 an hour or £7 an hour, if you've got a heart that cares, you will care whether you're getting paid £7 or £15. If you've got a heart that doesn't care, if you're earning £15 or £7, you won't show the care.
Well, this is what she finished with. It can also be incredibly rewarding, and it was a privilege to spend time with some of the residents. But the sad truth, though, there was never enough time just to sit and talk to them.
No.
You see? So, I don't know, we seem to have a mishmash here of just totally uncaring, treat our elderly in such a way. I'm struggling for a word to describe them. But we've fostered an environment where these scumbags are they rise to the top. They get to have the job. So the real nurses, the ones who will care, the ones who will do it for nothing, they're being squeezed out by these nutcases, basically, Joanne.
Mm.
I don't know.
Something is very seriously wrong. That in this day and age, the day and age we live in, this is going on. this is going on in our country. How can it be? But it is. It is. And the thing is, all these young people, don't think that you're not going to get old, because you are. You know, don't think it can't happen to me. These old people were young once. These old people should be cared for and loved and nurtured. They, you know, these old people, if it wasn't for them, most of us wouldn't even be here by now. They lived through the war, you know. They lived tough lives. They lived through the war days. They were uncomplaining. They got on and they battled and they had hardships and they didn't complain. It was a different generation, and they need to be cared for and nurtured, and we should be thanking them and bending over backwards for them.
This is what gets me in the West, Joanne, and it really does. I mean, if you look at other cultures and countries, the eldest in the community are the wisest.
Yes, and they're revered and codded, and so they should be like a baby. They should be looked after.
Yes, and I mean, if there's any problems within the community, where do you go for the answer? You go and seek out the elders' knowledge. This is
of course.
This is
if this happened to a baby, if this treatment happened to a child, this country would be in uproar.
Oh, but it is.
What?
I mean,
why is it with elderly people? We should be in absolute uproar. Our elderly people should be so looked after like cotton wool, you know, just loved and cherished, and, you know, maybe more volunteers need to be going into these places, and they should be more open to the public. I don't know, but something's got to be done for these people.
Kick the profit out of care. We need to get rid of these corporations.
Yes, absolutely,
I mean,
absolutely. Profit, it shouldn't be a profit thing. It should just be, it should be care, but not profit. Of course it should.
Yeah.
But it seems today, unfortunately, everything seems to be about money, money, money. And what these people who keep making all this money don't realise the most important thing in this world that we have that can't be bought with money is love. And that is, you know, wake up world. All the money in the world won't bring you happiness. You've got love in your heart, you go a long, long way.
That's it. They've flipped the system where it's gone from care to cash.
Yes, it has. Yes, it has. I'm afraid it has.
And anyone thinking that it's just the elderly, I'll remind you again about Kane Gorney, who was 22, died from dehydration after phoning the police for a drop of water. And it does happen to the youngsters as well in the
yes. It's the whole, you know, it's a lottery.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, you'll get good care. If you're unlucky, you won't. It's a lottery, and it shouldn't be a lottery. It shouldn't be a lottery. And also, it shouldn't be covered up when something terrible happens. Because terrible things are happening, and the thing is, they are being covered up. They're being covered up.
And blatantly covered up. I mean, inquiry after inquiry, they just seem to come and pass away. Nothing gets done. I mean, in the case of the Liverpool Care Pathway, they had their inquiry, a commission, 2013, headed again by Lady Newberger. They say, yeah, we're going to reform it, abolish it, this, that and the other. But the doctors come out and just said, listen, you haven't abolished nothing, you've just rebranded it, painted it up, called it a different name. But it's basically business as usual. We've got to... This seems to be a root issue we're tackling here, Joanne. It needs to be dealt with in the people who are applying for these jobs. They're not suited for care work.
No.
I mean, in the case of that panorama, the one least suited for care work was the one who had the promotion. So anyone else could never work under such a woman, I wouldn't think. No. It's broken, Joanne. Our health system is broken, I think.
Yes. I think it is.
And it's down to us as a people and as a nation to do it, because the politicians certainly aren't going to do it. The bureaucrats certainly ain't going to do it.
No. People need to stand up and fight, but also, I mean, I would say in the whole of England, this petition I've got going, I don't think there's another recording of somebody screaming in agony like my dad.
No, I mean...
But that's a reality, and I want this recording to get in front of David Cameron, and I want to see what he's got to say about it. And that is where...
Would you like to talk about the petition?
Can help.
Yes, can we talk about the petition a little bit, please, Joanne, about...
Yes, I have a petition, and, well, there's recordings on the petition. I've got two of the most barbaric recordings I think you'll ever hear, to be honest with you. But they are real, and they are my father, screaming out for help, and I'm begging for help. That's what the recordings are. And I want David Cameron to listen to these recordings. My father, he fought for, he was in the King's Royal Rifle Corps, my father, and he fought for this country. He was badly wounded. He was Montgomery's finest, King's Royal Rifle Corps were, and he was out in Greece, in South Africa. In Greece, the fighting got so bad, his regiment was called up to fill up the gaps because there was a lot of fighting with the royalists. People wanted to get the royalty out, and it was a pretty nasty, awful battle. And the Battle of Alaman, it was pretty horrendous. And, you know, if it wasn't for people like my father, we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be here. And I want David Cameron to listen to my father. He runs this country. He runs this country that allowed my father and others like him to be screaming in agony, to be dying like that. I don't think David Cameron would suffer like my father because he's probably got private health care. But I want him to listen, and I want him to comment, and I want him to do something about it. I want it debated in Parliament, basically. That is what this campaign is about. For David Cameron to listen to my father's recordings, to debate them, and to do something about them so it does not happen to anybody else as it is at the moment.
At the end of the day, they just buried it, Joanne, and they're trying to ignore it.
Yes, they tried to cover it up, but little did they understand the love of her daughter for her father, and it will never be covered up. I promised him when he died in my arms, Dad, your suffering will never be in vain. It will help other people. My father's suffering will protect other people. Those recordings are going to be put to good use. That is why I'm playing them. That is why I've got my petition, because they have to be put to good use. They have to be. They have to save others. Nobody can go through what my father did. But they are. As we speak, they are.
Yes, they absolutely are. Day in, day out again.
Yeah.
I'd remind our listeners to a startling fact that we touched upon earlier, which is 33 people a day are dying in our hospitals, young, elderly, and, you know, the whole spectrum, but 33 people a day are dying from thirst.
Yeah.
Thirst alone.
And how many are dying in agony? A lot more than that.
Well,
A
yeah.
lot more than that.
It's difficult to comprehend. That's why people really, really need to listen to these cries, pleas for help, and the Panorama documentary, and do a little bit of research into how broken our health service has become. Anyone who's spent any length of time in a hospital over the last 15 years would realise a massive change, I think, if they haven't been there for a while. I mean, there's not a lot of compassion with the nurses today, I don't think, personally, Joanne.
No. I mean, at the hospital where my dad was, some of the nurses were wonderful, but some of them weren't, you know?
Yeah.
Some of them weren't. And, you know, even if people don't want to listen to my recordings because they are very upsetting, you know, and I'm talking first in them, they don't have to listen, but they please just sign, you know? It's a win-win situation, you know? David Cameron has got to listen to these recordings because they're going to help you. They will eventually help you. Don't turn a blind eye to this.
No, this is
going on. You know, don't wait till it happens to you. Don't wait till it happens to your family. Do something about it now while you can. You know, you show some compassion. It's a subject people don't want to talk about. You know, people think, oh, no, you know, they don't want to face this, but you have to. It's a reality. It's happening.
Frank was lucky because he had a caring, loving family around him, but there's a lot of people who are on their own, Joanne, isn't there?
Absolutely. I slept up there with my dad. I wouldn't leave him. I slept there. You know, if I hadn't been there, actually, he would have died alone. He would have just died with no one there because he died at night. He would have had nobody with him.
Yeah.
The nurses certainly wouldn't have called a family member. You know, he just died. He would have just died. How many people, elderly people, have no relatives? I know many who don't. You know, and that, you know, and I don't want to. The thing is, what's so terrible about this? You know, it could frighten so many people, but you know, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but we've got to be faced. It's got to be faced.
Vanessa Evans, who done the undercover footage of her great-grandmother, Mrs. Grant, when she told her gran before she died that she had captured these awful nurses doing what they did, her last wish basically was, does that mean it will stop and not happen to other people? And that's a direct quote. Incredible that we've come to at this point, 2015, in the UK, where we are treating our elderly like this.
Yes.
People, you know, excuse me, they'll sit in front of their red top newspaper, and they'll show a photo of an old pensioner who's been beaten up, and they will immediately all jump to action and say, "This is the same, Joanne."
Well, of course it is. And also, what I find amazing is the newspapers and the celebrity. Celebrity. What's the matter with this country that celebrity can mean so much more than an elderly person? Something trivia can make the news, and yet something that is so important, the backbone, the core to humanity, can be ignored. What is the matter with humanity today that celebrity can be right up there and something so important can be right down there? What is the matter with people?
Yes.
Get your priorities right.
It's upside
Get
down.
your priorities right.
It is totally Orwellian.
I beg your pardon?
It's Orwellian. We live in an Orwellian state. George Orwell. Everything is back to front. Healthcare
I'll say it is.
It's,
I'll say it is.
again.
And also, if say it was a celebrity or somebody who something so terrible happened to like this, it would be front page news. It would. Why does it take something like that to for it to have somebody famous to make it front page news, as if Joe Bloggs isn't important?
Beckham stubs his toe, and he's
on the front page news. Yeah,
all summer he'll be on there with his face boot on. It's happened, or he gets a new haircut, and the world stops. But here we have the most important issue, I think, that faces a society. A society can be judged by how it treats its elderly.
Absolutely.
So there we go, and that's a judgment on us all, because we allow it to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got a state of play in the West here, where we just get rid of our elderly, hide them, give them the best chemical lobotomy big pharmaceuticals can give. With all the drugs they give them, they just shunned away in the corner and put on the Liverpool care pathway, which is anything but. Please, listeners, take time to have a look into it. They're just pumped full of drugs in a vegetative state, and forgotten about. Disgusting it is.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is war hero Frank Foster, Joe's dad, and just listen to this. think that's it. Yeah, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, can you hear me, Joanne?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty horrific. It's more than pretty horrific. It's scandalous. If I hadn't had these recordings, that would have gone untold.
Indeed.
That would have gone untold.
Yeah.
And I want David Cameron to hear that. That is my dad, 93 years old, blind and deaf, his final days. My dad died with no clothes on. My dad died, he'd ripped his clothes off. He was in such distress and agony, and it was avoidable. And nobody, but nobody, is to blame. My dad's suffering is not going to be in vain. It can't be. This cannot be allowed to happen. It cannot be allowed to happen. So I beg every single person, please sign my petition. This is a problem that is nationwide in our country. Sign my petition. David Cameron, listen to those recordings of my father, no evidence of neglect, and let us see what he's going to say about it. Let us get this debated. Let us get this stamped out, this barbaric, disgusting treatment in hospitals, multi-million-pound hospitals that are not fit for purpose. Let us get this stamped out. I just beg you, like I had to beg for pain relief for my father, I beg every one of you just to sign my petition on my Facebook page, on my Twitter page, get this out into the public, get signs on my petition, and we can all together make a change. We can all change. If you have a heart, we can all change for the future, for future generations. Otherwise, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, that wasn't easy listening at all, and it should strike everybody. Everybody needs to take note. This is going on every day.
Yes, it is.
These screams are being captured by Joanne, but these screams are going on now, somewhere, right now.
I said to one of the nurses, I said, do you see this often? And he said, yes, it's very common.
And that's just one hospital, Joanne.
That is just one hospital. Hospitals, you know, in the hospice, I don't believe this would have happened. He would have had the care in the hospice. He wouldn't have stuff like this. And I want to say, my campaign isn't about killing people. You know, I said, like, it's to do with assisted dying. I use those words, but what I actually mean is, my dad had 1 week to live. That week he had to live should have been pain-free. He should have been pain-free. He should have been dignified. He should have been serene and out of all pain completely with his family around him. That is what I mean with assisted dying. That he was given enough pain relief to take the pain away, even if it ends his life sooner. You know, this isn't about killing people or, taking a life. This is about end-of-life care, being pain-free and distress-free. And that's all. And it's not much to ask for in this day and age. It's not much to ask for. And it's what we would all want for all our families. Any of us, would you look at your loved ones and say, that would be okay to happen to my loved one? I mean, my dad was walking 2 years ago. He was fit. He played golf. You know, my dad wasn't blind 2 years ago. He had bad eyesight, but he wasn't blind. He's always had, his hearing since the war. He had tinnitus, and his hearing got worse and worse and worse. You know, he was a fit, healthy man at 90 years old who suddenly deteriorated, and it can happen to anybody. Let's do something about it now. Let's all use these, all of us use these recordings. Let everybody in England know these recordings exist and use them for the good of people, you know. Let my dad suffering help other people. That's all I want to happen, you know. My life is devoted to that cause now. I love my dad with all my heart. And my life is devoted, day in, day out. I'm at my computer campaigning for my dad's suffering to help other people. I'm not doing this for anything else. I'm not doing it for my dad. He's dead. My dad's dead. I'm doing this so his suffering helps others. Please understand that, and please just support me and get behind me.
Again, where can the listeners give you that support on Facebook? Could you give the name of the site and whatnot, please, Joanne?
Yes, of course. My Facebook page is www.facebook.com/joanne.fowler.3152. And I actually spent Christmas Day at the War Memorial. The whole Christmas Day I sat there, and it was wonderful. That was my first day of my campaign. No newspaper wanted to print my story. No local paper wanted to print my story. Nobody was interested. Nobody was interested at all. I was probably the only person in England to spend my Christmas Day at the War Memorial in memory of my dad, and nobody gave a damn. Country, please wake up. Please wake up, this is happening. My Twitter, capital J, J-O, capital F, Fowler, and just please support me. Sign my petition.
Joanne also has a YouTube channel where you can let others listen to Frank.
Yes.
As upsetting as it is, and it is, it really needs to be acknowledged, because this cannot go unnoticed, ignored. This has to be tackled. It is of urgent necessity that in order to fix this broken society, we have to. The society is judged on how it treats its elderly and its young. And Britain 2015 ain't too funky. Because what we are doing is just shipping them off, hiding them in these for-profit nursing homes. Steal your house to pay for the drugs, by the way, and you stay there. Do the same with your kids too. We've got to snap out of this. We're sleepwalking into a nightmare.
Absolutely. Can I say, if my dad had thought that his suffering would help other people, this was the type of man he was, he would have suffered. If he'd have thought he was helping others, he would have suffered. He would have suffered gladly. Don't let his suffering be in vain. It can change things for the better in our country.
I'll echo the words of Mrs. Grant, who simply said, when she found out her granddaughter had captured it, will this help it stop to others? We just need to stop it. Our elderly are getting tortured. Because that is what we're listening to, Joanne. That's torture, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. And you look, they're so frail. My dad could barely walk. And the nurse, when he used to cry in pain, the nurse said, get up and walk around. Well, he could barely walk. It took him ages to get out of bed. Get up and walk around. Oh.
No empathy.
You know.
No empathy.
It's shocking. It's just too shocking. You look at a little old lady or a little old man, and they're vulnerable, and they just have to be cared for. They have to be cared for.
There's not a lot of care in the care system.
No, I'm afraid of people in the care system.
What you just said there, again, I'll echo what happened to Kane Garney's family. Died of thirst, at the age of 22, and when they were holding his lifeless body, they were asked by a nurse, can you finish so we can bag him up now? This is a fact. It was heard in Westminster Coroner's Court. That was the evidence given in the court, with broken-hearted family round the bed to say, hurry up, we need to bag him up.
I would say as well to nurses and doctors, health professionals, if you see something terrible, have the guts to report it. Don't be afraid to speak out. You know, when you see something terrible going on that you're not happy with, say something about it. Show a bit of backbone and speak out. Don't be afraid to speak out against something so unjust. Don't turn blind eyes. Speak out.
Again, shown in the Panorama investigation, nurses walking back and forth, just leaving people in their own mess. But the ones who can't bear it, the good ones within the system, who are forced out, because the system is built up and is structured in such a way that any good, honest, caring person has to leave for the sake of their own sanity, by the sound of it. But these people, you don't just walk away. Shout it out, whistleblowers, we need more, come forward, bring this footage, as harrowing as it is, forward. People need to see it. It's not down to Cameron, it's down to the people.
Yeah, if there wasn't so many mistakes made in hospitals, if so many reports weren't having to be done, so many investigations, there'd be so much more time for the doctors and nurses to do the jobs that need to be done. So much money is wasted on trying to cover up the things that they've done wrong. You know, stop doing things wrong, and then no money will be wasted on that for a start. You know, it's all corrupt. I'm afraid it's all corrupt, and I'm sorry to have to say that about the National Health Service.
Yeah, and it's almost like mechanical. It's so unhuman. They're not allowed to bond with their patients or have any chat to them. Like you said earlier, Joanne, you touched on it. They don't look at them as people, do they?
Some do, but some don't.
Yes.
Some do and some don't. You know, I don't want to tie everybody with the same brush, but there are some wonderful nurses.
Of course.
Said that before. There are some They do some amazing work.
Of course, but I mean...
but there are some terrible problems.
Yes, I think this is deep-rooted. And it's a reflection on us all as a society. It's not getting... yes, let's get Cameron to hear it. Let's get the House of Commons to hear it. But let's get the people to hear it. In my mind, this is just so horrific. It doesn't... why we are struggling to try... It should be an absolute outcry. It should be outrage out there.
It should be in every newspaper.
You think so?
Every newspaper should... No newspapers want to know about my campaign.
No, they'll have Miley Insider swinging in on a wrecking ball wearing next to nothing, sticking her tongue out. It's a bloody joke.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Very, very wrong.
It is, and it needs to be addressed. It needs to be fixed, and this is what we're starting to do. This is what we're doing now, and everyone needs to, yes, get upset, go through the processes, anger, upset, but then focus to get it fixed.
Yeah, we want positive. Let's get positive. Positive action.
It's no good wallowing in it. It's happened. It is happening.
Yeah,
it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And my dad would not be one for blame. He would be one for change.
Yeah.
He's not one for blame. He would not want, he would not want one person to be held responsible. He would want change. He would support me, what I'm doing now, for change. There's got to be no blame, because, I don't know who to blame. The whole system. It's got to be change.
Exactly.
The whole thing has got to be debated. At root cause, root level, it's got to be debated.
Yeah, and
it can't be a hit and miss lottery when you go to hospital. You've got to know you're going into hospital and you're going to expect good treatment. And in a nursing home, you've got to know that your loved ones are being cared for. You haven't got to think, oh God, are they safe?
There's a lot of doctors, specialists who have had to leave, Joanne, because they've been crying for this debate has been required for the last 20 years, and the politicians have ignored it. But even though the people within the professions themselves can see the changes, they bring in these people to come in and chop and change things up and radicalise things and whatnot. They haven't got a clue what they're doing. And the real professionals are not being listened to. They're being ignored.
I have a message here, actually, from a supporter that I got. And it says, I have worked as a nurse for many years. During this time, the care for the elderly leaves a lot to be desired. I could write a book about the lack of love and care they receive, both in hospitals, residential homes, and in the community. I beg you, Mr. Cameron, to ensure a better standard of care for our elderly now and in the future. It breaks my heart to see people who have fought for our country die through neglect and don't care attitude. Well, that is from a nurse,
Yeah.
And I have heard from several nurses who are kind and care what's going on,
We spoke about it earlier, the Liverpool Care Pathway, and how, when it was discovered by the public, how horrific that was being implemented.
Yeah, that's shocking.
Yeah, but even then,
shocking.
Even when they come out and said, okay, we're going to abolish it. No, the professional says, the senior doctors within the Pacific field said, oh, hang on a minute, you've done nothing, you've just rebranded it. You've not abolished nothing, it's still the same. They just dress it up a different way and sell it to you another way.
Yeah. Well, why does it take so long for these laws to be implemented as well, Why does it take years and years and years to have a bill passed on something so basic as human care?
Yeah, it certainly makes you think. The motivation, I mean, as you say, it's a thing on society. What's that, a bill about the old? Oh, right, that'll go on the back burner then.
Yeah.
Let's talk about getting the World Cup.
Yeah.
Let's talk about...
I do believe that, you think I started off with one person hearing this recording. It's now got, 9,000 signs almost on the petition. I believe every single person who hears these recordings will actually sign that petition.
Oh, yeah.
Wouldn't it be amazing if we could get 100,000 signs and that, everybody could see David Cameron listen to that? Wouldn't it be amazing?
I think that's that it should be standard. We should be able to get 100,000 in a week, you'd think, wouldn't you?
It couldn't be made up. It's reality. And I think he owes it to every single person in the country to listen and to do something to ensure the safety of our entire nation.
This needs to be heard, it needs to be addressed, and in order for Frank and everyone else. I mean, but we got Frank Foster, your 93-year-old man, father, grandfather, war veteran, gentleman.
Absolutely gentleman, yes, he was.
And there we go. You viewed it, and you viewed it from his loving daughter, Joanne. And now we've got to do something about it. I mean, let's get this petition out there. That's a start. And let's have this debate, because it's a vital debate, and it's one which we need as a society and a community as a whole.
It's not isolated to one town or one country. This is
not.
countrywide. Countrywide.
Indeed.
As all my, messages tell me.
Yes, absolutely. It is up and down the country, and
Yes,
it's a
Yes,
debate.
it is.
It's a debate that needs to be had as soon as possible, because it is a reflection on our society and how sick our society has become.
People would be enough, but I think about it. Execution was abolished in this country, and yet what is happening in the hospitals is just that, but worse, because people are dying in agony. With an execution, at least it's quick.
I'm trying to think of something positive to try and leave things on, Joanne, but I can't.
Yeah.
For a
Well,
minute.
let's just pray for change. Pray that my dad, Frank's law, after my dad, changes will be made, and his suffering is not in vain. His recordings will make a change. Get behind my campaign, get those signs on my petition, get it shared with the whole country, and let's together as a nation make a change for the better, for all humanity, No more, let's put the blame behind us, start afresh, and make a change, a positive change.
Thank you, Joanne. I was struggling for words there, but I think that you nailed it. And on behalf of all the listeners and everyone here at the Common Law Court of Wales, we thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you
and
very much for having me on your radio programme.
A direct link to the petition can be found in the description box.
Thank you.
After all this time, she seems fine, but she's not the same as before. Used to be so bright, now she's got no light. Losing is a game for us all, she says. I'd love to see him alive again. He was my best friend. I'd love to see him smile again. He was my best friend. After all the wakes, he seems fade by the bittersweetness of life. Used to be so cool, too cool for school. Losing is a game we never like. And he says, I'd love to see her alive again. She was my best friend. I'd love to see